Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Grounded. I have Dr. Molly Parker, the physical therapist, with us today, who you might know from Instagram. She is such a lovely human, and I'm really excited to share this podcast with her today. If you could introduce yourself and kind of tell us a little bit about yourself, I would love that.
Yeah. Hi, everybody. So my name's Molly Parker. I'm really excited to be here today because I'm a healthcare provider. I'm a physical therapist, and I treated kind of the funky cases along with, your standard neck and backs and all those things. But I also had my own journey with concussion, especially at a time when it was still listed as like psychological if you were still having symptoms. So I had a really long go of it. I was in a car accident in 2011. I had a concussion. I thought they just went away because there wasn't that kind of information now. And I ended up falling into that pattern of symptoms getting worse, people not knowing what was happening, knowing why, as I'm sure many of you can relate to, going to like a bajillion healthcare providers, not knowing how to explain it. No one knows how to help. And I really ended up steadily getting worse and worse and worse. And I ended up, bedbound at home with my mother taking care of me and not being able to drive. But I knew that these were things that we can improve. And I knew there had to be people who could help me. So I just kept like knocking on doors and I eventually found people who knew what they were doing. And then they connected me to people who knew what they were doing. And now I am doing significantly better. I've started a business to help people avoid the pitfalls that I went through in concussion. We have a lot of dizziness as well in concussion. So there's some overlap there. And then my healthcare providers say should make a full recovery, which is like crazy after all this time. But I'm just kind of doing better and better and like really happy to be here. Like share everything I can to help you, get your quality of life back.
Absolutely. I think that's it's such a great story, and it's such a hard one. Like, I've been to every doctor and no one can help me, but it's also the best thing to remind everyone of like there are always answers. There's always hope. There's always something new you can try, even though there's not enough research about concussion and dizziness and like all of the disorders. There's more today than there were a couple weeks ago, a couple of years ago, and we just know so much more than we knew before. And I'm so excited for you and proud, even though I don't know you that well. And I love seeing all of your return to work content you've been putting out lately, at least when we're recording this. And I've loved seeing you like pace yourself so well. I'm like, oh, look at that. She's like going to a coffee shop for some time and like doing the less cognitively difficult things while at the coffee shop, and then doing the more cognitively difficult things when she's at home. And like just watching you being like, I know you know what to do, but it's always so fun to see people go through this process and be like, I'm doing this really, really intentionally. And I love, I just love watching it. I think it's so fun.
Well, that's great. You know what's funny is I first started and I was doing it like every day. And I was like, excuse me, miss, you literally teach this. And what you tell people is to start every other day. And so it's just like such a reminder to give yourself like grace during the process, but also like how helpful it is to have someone outside of yourself that you can like bounce things off of, whether it be like a Dr. Madison and like group fit or like an occupational therapist or something like that. But I just like can't underscore like it's so nice to have other people be able to like bounce ideas off each other like that. And then do it really intentionally on your own too. Cause there's so much I think that we know that we don't give ourselves credit for. And there's so like much that we can support ourselves with too, but it's just such a funny balance.
It really is, because I think sometimes as a physical therapist, it's easier for me to be like, okay, do every other day. And then when you next time I see you, you're like, well, I went every other day and then I didn't feel so great. So I like went every second day. So like that's a failure this week. And I'm like, no, not at all. That's a huge accomplishment that you notice that this thing was hard. And you're
Mhm.
like, I actually need to scale back to do what's right for me in this moment. And then like next time I can try going every other day or something like that. Or maybe you were like, well, I could go every day for the first 3 days and then I had to take 2 days off. And like, what does that teach us? And that is such a better experience. And like being able to bounce that off of someone is such an important thing, because again, it's easier for me to see what you're doing right or maybe need some adjustment versus giving yourself enough credit or slack.
Yeah,
I think it's hard
totally.
to do. Totally.
Yeah.
So I'd love to know kind of what your journey as a healthcare provider was without the support of the healthcare system. And this is a hard thing because you're like, I know how to use this system, or at least I feel like I should. I can say that I don't know how to use this system and I feel like I should. But most healthcare providers say, like, I feel like I should know how to use the system and it's really working against me. And I'd love if you spoke a little bit to what that was like.
Yeah, because I felt like I did. So my experience before, so I come from a medical family. So like all my family, like I have a mom who's a nurse and a dad's a dentist and my sister's a doctor and like, so I felt like I knew that. My mom would be like, oh, what's da 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 when we were growing up. And I was just shocked at how easy it was to fall through the cracks. Like knowing everything that I know, knowing how to navigate, I felt like I had a decent idea of how to navigate insurance. I had a decent idea of how to get into the healthcare system. Had a pretty decent idea because I worked with a lot of these out of the box people. Like my clinic was known, like if people have something weird going on, send them to our clinic and we'll figure it out. And they usually had a lot of different things going on where you needed multiple healthcare providers. And concussion is the same way. And so I even had that background, and it was just the ease at which you fell through the cracks was pretty startling if you had something that people didn't really know a lot about or didn't fit into the box. And then as it progressed, I found it really, I don't even know what the word is, but I can say it was like, you lived your life. I worked since I was 12. I have a doctorate degree. I like my life. I'd like to keep living it. The amount of people that attribute it to like something character wise, like you're not trying hard enough or you're not thinking positive or things like that was kind of like, that doesn't, does who I've been make any sense with that? Like, does that match? And I think a lot of people experience that with concussion. And I know with like dizziness stuff, things where you look normal is a little bit of a different animal sometimes. And I found that added like a whole different component because it's not just you're trying to get the health stuff treated. It's then you have this maddening thing of trying to be believed and trying to explain what you're experiencing, but you don't really have the language for it. And it was just a really frustrating, not so great experience, to be
Yeah.
quite honest. Yeah.
That's infuriating,
Mhm.
honestly, and
Yeah, that's the word.
it is, and even if, like, you are not the patient and you're, like, outside looking in, be like, "Why is no one doing this for you?" Because a lot of times you can find, like, one provider who will be like, "I will be your advocate," and
Yeah.
sometimes you can't. Sometimes you can't, but
Mhm.
sometimes you can, and, like, even if that provider is, like, calling, knocking on doors for you, it's sometimes even still impossible. So I'm curious if you have any tips of like best ways to do that, or is it just like, I am going to call you incessantly until you call me back?
I think as far as like finding the right people, yeah, I think
Yes.
part of it is so you want to find a literate provider in whatever you think you're kind of dealing with. So, like whether it be concussion or some kind of dizziness, you want to find the person where that's what they do. And it can be in your area. It can be with telehealth now. It can be in your state, depending on where people are licensed. If you're international, there's even some people in the states that can help now with via telehealth. But you really want to kind of do a search like in your area or in your location and you're looking for specifically what you think your diagnosis is. It could be concussion, it could just be dizziness, it could be vestibular migraine. And you want to see on their website that they have it listed. And then you want to, get a good feel for them. If you think that might be a possible person, call their office first before you go in. And say, like, I'm so and so, I'm experiencing X, Y, and Z symptoms. Is that something you treat frequently with success? And some of them have no clue what you're talking about, which is a little bit of a red flag.
Yeah.
Might need to talk to like the therapist itself. But if that's a clinic that usually does that, they kind of know and the staff kind of knows. So you can get a good idea if it's a fit before you're spending your time going to all these appointments and spending your money and sitting in the parking lot and crying afterwards, like I used to. And then make your appointment from there. And then at your visit, it's just here's what I'm experiencing. What do you think we can do with this? It's really doing language where you guys are on the same team and it's like a team approach. I find that works much better than like, well, I have this and you don't know, da 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 da. It's really, you want to have everything should be collaborative, and you should leave feeling seen and heard. And if you don't, that might be a sign that it might not be the right person for you. But that's kind of the best place to start. I think I ended up with a lot of people who didn't know anything from the start, and I wasted my time, or I stayed with people too long because I didn't know what else to do and they were like nice. They didn't like necessarily know how to treat me. I think that's a way to approach it. The other thing I would do is get with people like my page, or like a Dr. Madison's page, who's already done it, who's already been there. There's free Facebook groups, and see if somebody can know somebody in your area that they've already been to. You can kind of use the people who've already been through it. We want to help you now.
Yeah, we do.
Have to go through what we did, but I found that to be the most effective.
I really like the tip about like making sure you feel, if you are the doctor, like they're collaborating with you and like they're on your team. Your healthcare provider, whether they like it or not, their job is to be your biggest advocate. And that doesn't always happen because healthcare, for lack of a better term, is a shit show in most countries.
Yeah.
So if you go in there and you're like, this isn't working for me, or this doctor feels like they gaslit me or told me I'm making it up, or you just need to be more positive, or maybe you should quit your job. Like none of those are good answers. But we also have to remember that like on that collaboration team, it's their job to do that, but also you have to use the right provider for the right thing.
Yes.
So if you're going to your medical doctor and you want to give them like your whole life story, and then you're like you're having an expectation of like a therapeutic type of response back, it's the wrong provider and the wrong story. So like go to your medical doctor for medical advice, hire a therapist so you can kind of work through the trauma of whatever's happening, hire a physical therapist so you can work through like your neck pain and the dizziness symptoms, and an occupational therapist to get you back to work. And I really think that what you're saying about having a collaborative approach is both within one doctor, like you and your provider need to collaborate together, but also having a team of people you can expect certain things from certain providers. Like we all go to school for a really long time to do a very bizarre and specific thing. Like I only do this one thing and I don't do the rest. And I don't know how to do the rest. So having that team approach, and I find sometimes your physical therapist is a good place to start for someone who can kind of be the linchpin of those people. Like a lot of times your physical therapist will be that empathetic human, because we tend to be, of like, I will call these extra people for you and like think about you after and do extra research, and be able to refer you to other people. And sometimes that is your medical doctor. Sometimes it's your occupational therapist. It can be different depending on the person, but having one person who feels like they can kind of coordinate that and kind of give you a direction on where to go next can also be helpful.
Yeah. You guys can't see me, but I'm like nodding my head the whole time.
Yes, totally. And it's, again, I want to refresher on how hard that is. Like, I don't want to gaslight people into thinking like they're doing it wrong because they don't have this. Like, it's a hard thing to do, but do keep calling and do keep finding someone new. Like you're saying, Molly, like it is possible, but it's hard and it's annoying.
Yeah, it really is. You have to learn self-advocacy. And I think that can be hard for people, but it'll be important and it'll serve you the rest of your life. So stick with it.
100%. Do you have any things that you like to bring to an appointment that you have found are helpful?
Back in the day, my mom made me a binder of like, and if you're a loved one that's like, I want to help and I don't know how, she just put together like everyone I'd seen and any notes from them. That could be helpful. But I think usually what I did, because I knew as a healthcare provider what I needed for people. So I would come prepared with that. So it's usually generally what happened. And again, like the medical aspect of it, what symptoms I'm experiencing, if you have any awareness of things that like specifically trigger it for you or things that specifically calm it down, that's really helpful. I'm kind of thinking like, what information does this provider need to best serve me? And I'm usually coming with that and I make a few notes. And then I was having memory issues. So if any of you have that, or you just get like flustered, I would write down like specific questions that I wanted answers to. And I would think like, what's the most important thing that I need to leave with here? Like, is it a referral? Is it, do I know this person's the person? Like, what is it? And I would make sure that that was kind of like prioritized. And then I would say, if you have anything that you're like, I really specific and concerned about this, make sure your provider knows at the beginning of the visit. Don't like when they're like, oh, is there anything else? Like drop your most important thing, like make sure they know at the beginning of the visit. And that's usually how I did it. And then if it was like major, you're going to a lawyer or you're going to a doctor that deals with like you're doing like an insurance thing, which is a whole other bag of worms, I would come with the binder so that they had all my stuff. Other things that are helpful if you're on medications, you could bring the bottles. Otherwise, you're writing down the medication and how often you're taking it and the dose. Things like that is what they want to know. And it's write it down once and bring it so you don't have to like keep doing it every visit.
Totally. I love that you have both a binder and specifics, because I think all too often there's like a binder and you're like, let me read you this 10 chapter novel. And it's like, that's not possible in 20 minutes. But if you have like, I have my history in case I need to like do a quick scroll through it and it's organized ahead of time and I can kind of get into it. But also I want to know these two things today. Like, can I get a referral and why is this happening? Or what is a concussion even? Like, can you explain that to me? If you can have those things, but then if they have questions for you, scroll through it. I think that's genius. I love your binder idea. I think that's super smart. Awesome. So I know you have a really amazing company called Concussion Compass, which is closed right now, but is reopening later this year. I would love to know the story about that, but I know I didn't put this in the question, but first, could you explain to us what a concussion is?
Yeah. So a concussion is a type of traumatic brain injury, and it can happen anytime you have an acceleration and deacceleration of the brain within the skull. So most commonly we think of a hit to the head, but it could be just a hit to the body, like you fall on your tailbone hard enough to create that. It can be a blast injury. So anything that is creating that acceleration, deacceleration within the skull. You don't have to lose consciousness to have a concussion. That one gets sticky. I could hear that a lot from healthcare providers. If you didn't lose consciousness, you didn't have a concussion. That's not true. And basically what happens is there is a stretching and shearing of the ion channels where they open up. We get this neurobolic cascade, and that's where we start to see symptoms. That's where we have dizziness, headache, emotional symptoms, sleep issues, anything like that. Typically in a concussion, you will see people have symptoms for about 7 to 10 days, and then the brain itself will heal at about 3 to 4 weeks, which is very important to note because your symptoms are going to be gone before your brain is fully healed. So that's something to consider for sports and things like that. And then if you're experiencing symptoms longer than about 4 weeks, the concussion event itself is now over, but you're having some like function and connection issues with certain areas of the brain. And that's what we see in persistent post-concussion symptoms. So if you're about 4 weeks out now, we consider that persistent post-concussion symptoms. That used to be called post-concussion syndrome, talking about the same thing. It's just a more medically updated term. And there's treatment for that. And that is what I do.
Amazing. And I have a feeling that I know the answer to this question, but concussion treatment is going to look different for each person, correct?
So it's a brain, right? And your brain is everything you are and do. So it depends what areas were affected in your concussion for what we're going to treat. So there's different, what they call phenotypes. We can almost consider them like domains because they interact so much with each other. But it could be vision, it could be vestibular, like dizzy stuff. It can be cognitive. So there's different areas of your brain affected. And so part of what we're doing as healthcare providers who understand concussion is we're figuring out where specific symptoms are coming for you, and then we're targeting treatment for you. So it might look a little bit different than your neighbor who had a concussion or your friend down the street. And that's really normal. It's just very specific to what areas of your brain have been affected.
Totally. And I also want to know, or the people want to know, do you
people want to know?
The people give the people what they want, right? If you had a concussion 10 years ago and you are still experiencing symptoms today, can that still be from your concussion?
Yeah. So there's a little bit of nuance here, whereas if you have a provider say, your concussion is over. It's a little bit of like, yes, the acute concussion event is over, but that's what caused the persistent symptoms. And if you can still be experiencing persistent symptoms a month, 2 months, 2 years, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years out, what's important to know is that it's not a structural injury. So if you do an MRI, it's not going to show up. So what that means for us is it's a functional injury. And if it's a functional injury, it's something we can treat and retrain. It's a little oversimplified, but it's something we can treat and retrain, no matter how far out you are. So even if so for me, I'm 12 years out, and here I am like fully recovering. And a lot of that has been within the last like 9 months. And it was just a matter of getting the treatment that I needed to help retrain those areas of the brain. We'll hear people say, and insurance companies do this, is you're not going to get better if it's been longer than 2 years. That's not real.
Can I roll my eyes harder?
Yeah, I roll my eyes so much that I fall out of my chair. It's definitely like time can be important. So we want to get you treated as soon as we can. But it's not like, it's like, I joke that it's the rose from the Beauty and the Beast. It's not like if the last petal falls and you're done. It's like you can retrain things no matter how far out you are. And there's so much that we can do. And like Dr. Madison said, there's no better time in history to have a concussion or some sort of dizziness than right now, because we're just learning so quickly. And I think in the years to come, there's just going to be more and more and more that we know to be able to help. So
totally.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember my brother's really good friend got in a football accident in football practice his freshman year of high school. And he was told to sit in a dark room, and he sat in a dark room for 1.5 years before someone was like, you need to come on, let's get out of there. Let's start exercising and moving and doing all this stuff. And we know now that that was the worst thing he could have been possibly told for more than 24 hours. And 1.5 years later, he's doing great now. But it really is, you're right. It is the best time in history to have had a concussion. There is so much you can do, whether you had it 10 years ago, 12 years ago, yesterday. There's so much you can do about a concussion. And I find that people are like, well, I have concussion and I have vestibular migraine and I got BPPV and now I have triple PD and I have all these like acronyms that I don't even know what they mean. But all of those things, well, most of them are functional problems where you have this issue. Some of it might be structural, some of it could be functional, but there's treatment and ways to manage all of these things. And there's always stuff you can do. So don't give up hope, regardless of your diagnosis.
Definitely.
So now that you do have this amazing program, which is one of the reasons it's such a great time to have a concussion. There's never a good time to have a concussion, but it's a great time overall if you do have a concussion to get treatment. So there's a lot of people in group fit who have had a concussion in their lives and are still experiencing symptoms, and maybe they have vestibular migraine and triple PD as well. Just a lot of different people with different experiences, right? So what is concussion compensation?
Oop, I lost your audio for a sec there.
What?
Oh, there it is.
There we go. Okay. When did you start it? Why did you start it? And what does it do?
Yeah, so Compass started like a lot of those things do, out of my own frustration. It had been many, many, many years of figuring it out on my own. I had visual issues, so I'm like reading with one eye and I feel like I'm going to vomit everywhere, and I'm doing all the research myself. And I was like, this is ridiculous. And then it got to the point where I started to meet people who knew what they were doing. And I was like, if I just had this information sooner, this would have saved me so many years. So I started on Instagram, and I just wanted, my why was I don't want anyone to go through what I went through. And so I just started sharing information and sharing the stuff that I wish I had known, and all the most actionable things that I could think of that people would need to know in their own recoveries, and started with a real strong sense of community because it's such an isolating injury. And I'm sure, as many of you know, you're trying to explain it to people who don't live it, and it's like, they just don't get it. And so it was a place where people could be who all had this injury, they could get information, and then they could see like, oh, I'm not alone. We're all in it. And we'd all be like, oh yeah, this or that. And I just spent like 2 years with these people. I was still really and heavily in recovery myself. And I didn't have the capacity for more. But I knew when I was ready, I was starting to realize I wanted to do something with it. There was a time where I was like, I don't want anything to do with this stuff ever. And then that just kind of switched. So I just listened to people. Like, you got to know people. I learned what was wrong. I was getting the same questions over and over and over again. And I was like, it would be really great is if we had, I could give like, here's a 30-minute thing of all you need to know about headaches. Here's a 30-minute thing of all you need to know about nutrition, all these questions that I'm answering all the time. And so that's kind of how Compass was born. It was everything I wish I would have had in one place. And so it was the foundational things that everyone with the injury needs. And then it was bringing on guest experts so that everyone had access to good knowledge. It was me answering questions. It was a community aspect, and then it was just any of the supportive things, like we might have one on PPPD or how to navigate your injury in the holidays, relationships, anything like that. And it was just meant to be, I was just so sick of trying to find everything everywhere. And so I just wanted one place where it was all condensed in one spot and it was accessible. And that's what Compass was. So by the time I launched it, everyone, like, we'd all known each other for so long that we were all like, and it was just like, it was so fun. And so it was, we had a couple, I think 100 members right off the bat, and it was just like really fun. And it was it grew. And then we started to realize, oh, if we use this as like a specific program and like this order, people get even better results. And so that's what I'm doing now is I'm reworking Compass 2.0, which will be out in 2024 with all the things that we learned from the first, 1,000 people that did the first program. So stay tuned to Instagram and we'll keep you posted on, or join the email list and we'll keep you posted on when that's opening up and various opportunities for you. Time, there's lots of good stuff on Instagram too. And I put it all in little highlight bubbles so you don't have to scroll because vision issues are common in concussion. That just has kind of information condensed for you. And we have lots of freebies and it's just a lot of fun.
It is a lot. Your Instagram is a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Honestly. It makes concussion feel lighter.
Yeah, that's the goal because they just suck. Like, it's so heavy and everything around it is so heavy. And I look at other people's recoveries where they understand the diagnosis and there's levity in all of them. Like, the person gets to just be they get to just get better and they get to go to rehab and do their thing and they get to joke and they get to be positive. And everyone's like, oh, how great that you're so positive. And in invisible injuries, you're just having to like fight for it. And something that someone with cancer dancing, they'd be like, oh, how good for them. And with concussion, they'd be like, well, you look fine to me. So it's just, I'm like, I get it. And I know all these people experiencing it get it. And I just want a place where we can have that too. And I think play and levity can be part of healing. And that intensity is hard. And if we can all deal with it in a way where we're acknowledging it and we're validating it and we're making the most of it, I just think it's better.
I think it's better too.
Yeah.
I think I have the same goal with group.
Yeah.
Exactly. This really is frustrating and this really does suck. And that's okay for it to suck. And also, here are some things that you could do every day to make it a little bit better.
Yeah. And we can sit and suck. And we can also have when you're ready. And both are. And I just, it's honoring the whole journey. And I think
totally. And I think a lot of times we're told, like, don't embrace the suck. Like, everything has to be happiness and butterflies and like, just be more positive and it'll go away. And that's never the answer. Newsflash. But also it's like, if you embrace how much this sucks sometimes, it's actually going to help with your recovery in the long term, because you're not going to sit there and say like, this sucks into eternity, which you could, but give it that time and that space to be like, this is really annoying and it's really driving me crazy and I need to do something about it, but also I can't because I'm too overwhelmed right now. And I like that these kinds of groups really create space for both of those things.
Yeah, it's emotionally processing what's happening to you, and then it's helping give you tools to process it in a way where you can potentially come out better at the other side. Not just feeling better, but like better skills as a human and better quality of life and better relationships. And that's kind of infused into the whole program.
100%. And who is Concussion Compass for? Anyone with a concussion, specific people with a concussion, people who have a concussion can't sleep? What's it for?
for anyone who's experiencing persistent concussion symptoms. So if you've had symptoms for longer than about 4 weeks, it's for you. We say if you're having symptoms still at about 10 days though, to like preemptively start getting treated. And you can find stuff on my Instagram to figure out like specifically who to go see or send me a message. But the program is really for people about 4 weeks and on. And it's anybody. It's just as long as you are someone who is looking for avenues to improve and you're invested in kind of taking responsibility of that for yourself and knowing that if you're putting in the work in a way that works for your symptoms, that doesn't mean you have to like push through and like throw up everywhere. It means, you know, you're committing to yourself in a way that is honoring what you're going through. Then we're for you, like to help you do that.
Amazing.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Anything else?
I think we hit the high points. I mean, I could talk about concussions for like 10 years.
I feel you. I feel like I could talk to you for like 10 years. I still have some rapid fire questions for you, but anything else you'd like to bring up? Alternative. We can talk about whatever. I have time.
I think those are the main ones. I have some good I have the rapid fires,
Okay.
I'll say. Yeah.
Okay, fun.
That was really good.
Okay, ready? Okay, rapid fire. What's one thing you'd wish everyone would know about concussions?
We touched on this a little bit, but I want to say this over and over and over again. They're treatable. They're not something you need to live with. They're not something that it's tough luck. They're not something that you need to just wait and see. You do not need to sit in a dark room. They are something that is treatable, and you are going to actively go through the rehab process, meaning you're going to be participating in it with usually multiple healthcare providers.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Active participation, really, really, really important stuff. If you're sitting there and getting like a laser on your head, not the best option.
Yeah. And there's a lot you can do on your own, guys. Like, I don't want anyone to be disheartened if you're like, I am isolated and poor, because there's so many things that you can do on your own. And we can teach you how to do that. There really is so many ways that you can positively affect the way your brain is functioning and the way you're experiencing life.
Yay. Okay, next one. What's one thing you wish you knew when you first started this journey with concussion?
Okay, it's a little existential. I wish I knew that I would have to fiercely guard the space for my own healing. I think I was such like a little people pleaser, and I didn't like, if I thought in the beginning that people didn't think there was such a big problem because I wasn't showing them how much of a problem there was. Like, I literally thought like if I worked harder and still wasn't doing well, they'd realize it really was bad, instead of being like, this is the issue. I'm like a valuable person. I shouldn't be experiencing X, Y, and Z and trying to like vomit while I do everything. I need help. This is like what some of my needs are. I just didn't do that. I was very passive. I was very like, you know, stick it out, be a trooper. And I wish I would have known that that was going to be something I really needed to develop. Like, I really needed to be the one to like hold the space, and not everyone was going to respect it. And I still needed to like stand firm of like, this is my priority. This is what's going on with me, and it needs to be addressed. Or I need to take space, or no, I can't go to that thing, or you drive and don't make me feel bad about it. All that kind of stuff. It really took me a long time to learn that.
It's a hard boundary to set. Really hard. And it's also hard to recognize about yourself. Like, this is really hard for me and I need to stop.
Yeah. And it's like, give yourself grace with it, because that's like, I say this injury is like the unwanted gift of, it's really going to force you to look at some of your things that maybe aren't serving you, because now you kind of can't get away with it because you have these symptoms. And that could be your most powerful growth by far. But it's something you really got to lean into and get curious and give yourself a little grace, because it's just going to take time. But just your health is everything. And so it really deserves to be prioritized.
I couldn't agree more. And that sentiment is true whether you have concussion, whether you have triple PD, whether you have vestibular migraine, Meniere's disease, neuritis. Like, let me just go down this list of everything that exists in the world. Or if you're just feeling really overwhelmed with life in general. And if you are someone who's listening to this who does not have any form of chronic illness, this applies to life. Like, hold space for your own energy. Like, this is 2024. We're allowed to do this now, which is kind of amazing. But it's also hard to recognize, and it's a hard thing to do. So give yourself that
really
space.
Tough lesson because I was 26 when this accident happened, is like, all the people that I was trying so desperately to prove myself to, when I couldn't function, none of them were there. So it's like you really gotta value yourself and like know your worth and know what you're experiencing is real, and create as much space as you can for it, and be around people that are gonna support that and not try to convince people who are committed to misunderstanding.
There are some people like that. It's
It really
infuriating, but hey.
We call it incapable or unwilling to learn in Compass.
Incapable and unwilling to learn. I like that I'm stealing that and giving you credit, but stealing that forever. That's hilarious.
They go in your outer bubble of support where you're
like I don't.
People. Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah.
All right. And last one, what's the best piece of advice someone has ever given you?
So I've got two, and I think it's going to really, like, especially if you're really going through it right now in your recovery, I think it's going to be helpful for you. So the first one was the moments where it's daunting, the moments where you're so overwhelmed, you feel so crappy, you don't know what to do, it's just crushing. You look out forward and it just feels like you're frozen because it's just, there's too much. My therapist used to tell me, focus on what's right in front of your face. And that is so simple, but it helps so much. So anytime you're doing that, it is literally, what can I do right now? Not any other time in the future, not any time tomorrow. What do I need right now? Is that a little bit of a rest? Do I need to call and make that appointment even though I feel like it? Today, what's just the things that would move the needle for you that day? And that is it. And then I got through a lot of days like that. I had some days where I was living like 30 seconds at a time because my symptoms were so bad. But that's how you get through the best advice for like the really, really, really hard times. And then the other thing I would say is the best advice I got when I was just feeling like I'd tried everything and I'd gone to all the things and it just wasn't really working, but I wasn't functional. I wasn't at a place where I could like make it kind of work. I had a therapist was a neurofeedback specialist who's the sweetest guy, Myron Thurber, thanks. One of the first people to really believe me. He said a year is going to come and go regardless. Where do you want to be when it does? And so anytime I wanted to kind of like give up on the journey, I would think that the year is going to come and go. Like, where do I want to be when it does? And I would do the next kind of best thing for myself. And sometimes it panned out and sometimes it didn't, but it really helped keep me going.
That's such great advice.
Thanks.
I love it. And I think everyone can take that to heart regardless.
Yeah. It's so simple, but it's just, if you apply it, it really does help.
Both of those things are fantastic. Mm-hmm. Thank you so much for doing this with me today. I really had a good time. I love talking to you.
I was really excited.
I'm really excited. I'm still excited.
The nervous, sweaty. And then I'm like, no, I'm pretty excited though.
I get that every time I do this.
I do too. Every live thing, I'm like, I gotta air
out my pits.